Hey, Moon Apple here. I'm making a little video because the cool people at La Hacienda Creative, which is a sound studio and tech innovation lab here in Montreal, reached out to me and sent me some of their virtual instruments from a lineup of sound tools called MNTRA and asked me to do a little demo with them. It uses an in-house sampling sound engine called MNDALA 2. I just thought I would show you my process of how I was able to get some really cool textures and sounds and a full-blown musical demo in under 30 minutes. Personally, I really enjoy the ethos of the MNTRA instruments. They're samples of instruments and soundscapes from all over the world, and I think that can bring a really cool cultural depth and unique expansion to one's sound palette. First, I'll just quickly show how I use the MNDALA 2 sound engine, and at the end of this video there will be a demo showing a live performance using these virtual instruments with a MIDI controller and a MIDI keyboard. Let's hop right in. Okay, so I'm using Ableton, but the MNTRA instruments will work with any DAW of your choice. I'll just quickly explain my session here. I have one piano track that is recording an improvisation I do on piano, and the rest of the instruments are the MNTRA ones. And so these are all MIDI tracks. I'll just show you this first MIDI track, which I have MNDALA on, and there we go. So this is the MNDALA 2 engine. If you go first to the library tab here, you'll see all the sample packs that are available. And each of them have their own special aesthetic. Like for instance, the Hanoi instrument has a lot of sounds from northern Vietnam. For this particular track, I used TENEBRAE. TENEBRAE has a lot of really cool textures and ambient manipulations and evolutions that you can do to the sound, and it really fit my particular aesthetic. It's really organic, and I can find it being really useful when composing for things like film and video games, which I used to do. So after you choose your instrument, I'll just go into that here called Perform. So you can actually just go straight to noodling around and playing the instrument, and Perform provides a really cool visualization of what's happening. They already give you 3 variables per preset of what can be manipulated within that particular preset sound. And that's really nice because, you can just go straight to playing on your MIDI controller or even just like your computer keyboard. Here you'll see all the different presets. I ended up using this preset called End Times. I always like to keep the default presets, so when I make changes to the preset, I'll save it as a different one that has my own particular settings. And you can do that by pressing this plus here and saving it as a new preset. Back to the Perform tab, you'll see that there are 3 variables here, X, Y, and Z, and X is for texture, Y is for volume, and Z is for grain bounce. These variables will change depending on what preset you choose. And if you look here in Ableton, it's already automatically mapped, which is quite nice. I'm using as a MIDI controller an APC4 by Akai. And what's also nice about that is these 3 variables are just automatically mapped to the knobs on my MIDI controller. So I basically don't really have to do anything. It's just opening up the virtual instrument and it's already all pre-mapped. Alternatively, you can map via Ableton to whichever MIDI controller knob or fader as you like. So if we just take a look at X, the texture, I'll play a bit and I'll demonstrate what manipulating the texture does. So this is the sound not manipulated with X, Y, and Z at 0%. And if I slowly move the X up, you can hear the sound evolve, and along with it is the visual representation. And if I do Y is just the volume, and it has a different visual representation. And then Z is the grain bounce. So it's really cool. I can just, play it and get some really cool results. you know, create some tone and some climactic musicality. Really excellent for ambient music and film music. And that's basically it. And then here, this little keyboard shows, you know, what you're playing on the keyboard if you have a keyboard. So to demonstrate the second tab of the MNDALA engine, I'm going to show you what's on the second track of my demo. It's still the Tenebrae instrument because I really like it. So here's the Matrix tab. It shows the layers of a particular preset sound, which are the individual components. And, you know, you can solo and mute each one to see how it sounds. Like, for instance, we can solo this sound called God's Cab. Let's say you want to change a particular sound. Let's say, for instance, I don't want this chemist sound. I can click these arrows to choose another sound. And I could even click on this to see what sounds are available. And there are a lot, and they're organized. And it even has a nice description below kind of describing the sound and its range. So if I solo this audio sting, it sounds like this. And if I put them together, the whole sounds like this, which is pretty cool. Over here, you'll see a bunch of rectangles that say gain and pan. And what these do is show how the gain or pan of a particular component, how it changes with respect to the level of either the X or Y variable. So this triangle here represents the Y variable, and the Y level is nicely displayed with this coloration in the back. And this is the X, which is represented by this equal sound. So right now, we see that the God's Cab sound will increase in volume as the Y value increases. And let's just solo it to see if that's true. Yep, seems to be true. But let's say I actually want it to increase to 100 there and then decrease. So around the 50% mark with the Y knob, it increases and then it decreases as I continue to turn the knob. And then let's say I want it to start from left and then go to right. Yeah, so there's lots of cool things you can do and experiment with these gain pan graphs along with the separate components of a particular sound. And again, you just have a really cool representation here showing everything that you're doing if you're more visually inclined. On to the next tab, which is the sampler tab. I'm going to use the third MIDI track to demonstrate it. And for this one, I chose a different instrument called Galactron. I really liked it because I'm a little bit of a synth head, and Galactron has a lot of sounds that are very reminiscent of analog synthesizers, so that was cool. In the sampler tab, you'll see, similar to the Matrix tab, you can isolate the separate components that make up that particular sound. And for this preset called Estrella, which is a cute name, there are 6 sounds. They all have the same source sample, which is analog harpsichord, but as you'll see that the particular variables for each one vary. And that can really, you know, thicken up and create a chorusy type sound, or, you know, some really cool textures and create something that's really lush. Okay, so I'll just demonstrate the sound because it is probably the most distinctive sound in my demo. And how I made it was, I usually like to improvise on an instrument first, and in this case it was a piano keyboard. And I just went through the improvisation and I just chose a very small section of it that I thought would make a really good loop. And if we listen to that now, it sounds something like this. Okay, so if I play this riff and let's say I adjust the attack here, I want it to be, you know, kind of more legato and not as clear. Right? It makes a huge difference, actually. And, you know, there's not a clarity to each note. Let's say I want to go the other way in terms of envelope and I want something kind of more staccato sounding, I can bring the attack back down and also take down the decay. That's also pretty cool. So the envelope has a huge effect on your sound, especially for synths and stuff. And if I wanted to apply this envelope setting to all the samplers, I can by clicking this link button. Another cool button here is this one, where you can play samples on note release. So actually when the MIDI note is released, it will trigger this particular sample. And you can get some really cool, experimental results that way. Okay, let's just quickly move on to the colors section of the sampler tab. The colors are always my favorite part to mess around with because I'm a mastering engineer and we really have to be in tune to the coloration and timbral patina of music. And you have some very useful ones like a low pass filter and these really nice visuals just to show the cutoff. I appreciate that. And you can adjust it by just clicking on it simply, and it moves kind of very intuitively how you'd think it would. And so I can affect the resonance cue and the cutoff of this low pass filter. And like everything, it's very useful to have this graph that shows how the low pass filter will be affected according to the X, Y, and Z variables. And you can get some really interesting effects this way. A lot of it quite unpredictable, and you just have to play around until you find something that you like. And at the same time, while I'm here, I am going to explain this last global effects tab because, these colors are affecting these particular components individually. But let's say you wanted to do it for all of the sounds, then you can go to this global effects tab and then add your effects processes or your colors, as they say, this entire preset here. Okay, and I think that's basically how I made the Estrella sound for this demo. Last but not least is the sequencer tab, and I don't think this will be too long. It's quite a simpler sequencer, which is nice because nowadays sometimes you can get sequencers that are quite complex, and then the whole learning curve really just discourages you from even trying sometimes. So this is nice. It's very intuitive, and I'll show you how it works. I'm going to use this last track called the Punishers preset in the Tenebrae plugin. And let's go to the sequencer. So you have notes, which is exactly what you think it is. And then you have velocity, which is just, how hard or intense the particular note is being triggered. And then the length of the note. And these are the individual steps to the sequence. So if I play the riff that I had, yeah, so it's just a simple drum riff, and what's nice again is you can have all your drums in one track because you can have the individual components be separate drums, like a kick, snare, hi-hat, whatever. I only have 3 for this track. It's very simple. So I think my kick is here, right, and then here is kind of a clapping, a lo-fi clap. And then up here is what? Yeah, some type of experimental accent. It's kind of like noisy and lo-fi. Yeah, and that's fun. I played mainly with a number of steps and some other variables. You'll see that I made the number of steps to be like multiples of 10, I think. Yeah, so this knob down here is the steps, and I made it 10 because I kind of wanted the accent to change every now and then, just to make things have more movement, be less boring. And this is the speed. It's in quarter notes for this particular component. And then you can have, a swing if you want something more syncopated. And then here's the stride knob where if it's set to 1, it will play every single step, but if it's set to 2, it'll play, every second step, and so forth and so on. What I really appreciate about this particular sequencer is, let's say you are kind of lacking on a clear vision of what you want to do, and you just kind of want to play around and see what comes up, you have these, randomization buttons so that you can get something different. So if I just play this, and let's say I wanted the notes to change, and then maybe the velocity change, or I want the length to change. Maybe it's not the best sound for length. You can still hear it. Yeah, there's like a shorter clap and then a longer clap. Yeah, things like that. And you can change it accordingly. So that's basically it. And as you can see, I was able to get some cool sounds super fast. And I can just do it by changing the variables, and the tiny little visuals were actually quite nice as feedback, as opposed to just staring at numbers that might not necessarily mean anything to you. I think I made this demo in under 30 minutes, and if you're working as like a film composer or for video games and stuff like that, that's really useful, because you might need to produce a lot of ambient or background music real fast, and you can get something pretty high quality and with some unique sounds and some experimental results efficiently. Yeah, so there you go. Now I'm just going to show you how all these sounds kind of come together. So my particular process for this demo is I generally like to improvise on an instrument. I like to play things live and manipulate a sound in real time via the variables, which are linked to my MIDI controller. I just think it ends up being more in the moment that way, and more organic, and honestly a lot more fun to play than just triggering preset tracks or anything like that. That's just personally for me. And this instrument really works well with live performance with those XYZ variables that are linked to the knobs, and I can do that on the fly. So yeah, it's very flexible and very cool. So thank you for listening, and I'll just show you how all these sounds come together now.